I want to pick up on 755. So, Pippin and Gandalf go into Denethor's hall. Denethor, the steward of Gondor, father of Boromir and Faramir. And Gandalf says, I come with counsel, tidings, blah, blah, blah. And Denethor kind of knows who Pippin is to some extent, right? Is this one of the, two who saw my son die? Or you bring with you one who saw my son die? Is this he? Gandalf says, yeah, one of the two. Okay. Mentions that he's a halfling. Denethor, yep, see that. 755. And then he says, my Boromir, now we have need of you. Faramir should have gone in his stead. Faramir should have gone instead of Boromir. Why? Because then Faramir would be dead and Boromir would still be alive. Pretty much tells you everything you need to know about how Denethor viewed his two sons. Okay? Gandalf, he would have gone. What have we already seen? When Faramir talks with Frodo and Sam, Faramir says, I should have been the one to go. And why should he have been? The dream came to him first, and then came to him several more times. The dream that had the verse about, seek Imladris, where Elrond, the halfling and the Isildur's bane shall be shown and such. He would have gone, Gandalf says. Be not unjust in your grief. Boromir claimed that Aaron would not suffer any other, masterful man, blah, blah, blah. So, you already knew we were coming? He said, I've received this. And he lays down or shows them the horn that Boromir used to carry that he blew in Rivendell before they left. Pippin, that's the horn that Boromir always wore. And verily, Denethor says, verily. In other words, when he says verily, he's also saying, and the fact that you recognize it means that you do know who Boromir was and all that. Okay? So, bottom of 755. Denethor wants to know, how is it you lived? You puny little midget-like thing, and my son died. The mightiest man may be slain by one arrow, Pippin says. And Boromir was pierced by many. When last I saw him, he sank beside a tree and plucked a black feathered shaft from his side, like he's pulling a splinter out, but it's a... Then I swooned and was made captive. I saw him no more and know no more. But I honor his memory, for he is very valiant. He died to save us, my kinsman Meriadoc and myself, waylaid in the woods, blah, blah, blah. Then Pippin looked the old man in the eye, and pride stirred strangely within him. That is, within Pippin. Pippin suddenly, it's like his eyes opened to what he is now involved in. Stung by the scorn and suspicion in that cold voice. Little service, no doubt, will so great a lord of men think to find in a hobbit, a halfling from the northern shire. Yet such as it is, I will offer it in payment of my debt. And he pulls open his cloak, pulls out his sword, and puts it at Denethor's feet. Okay? Denethor smiles, He looks at it and says, this isn't yours. This wasn't made by you or your kind. And Pippin tells where it came from. And Gandalf says, are you sure? Do you really want to do... Notice Gandalf doesn't have the time to say Pippin. Let's go outside and talk about this for a moment. Pippin says, I am. Take the hilt. Speak after the Lord if you are resolved on this. I am. So Pippin does what? He swears fealty and service to Gondor and to the Lord and Steward of the realm. Now, when he says that, who does Denethor mean? Lord and Steward of the realm. Me, Steward of the realm. Lord and Steward, however, can be two different things. It can be king and steward. Because the king is the Lord. The steward is only the Lord while the king is absent. Jump fast forward. Later on, Pippin will still be a sworn liegeman to the Lord of Gondor. I don't know if I should say that. Have you all finished this? See, mostly, I won't go there. We'll pick that up later. So, Pippin looks at Gandalf and Denethor, and Gandalf says to him, top of page 757, excuse me. I have not ridden hither from Isengard 150 leagues with the speed of wind, not only to bring you one small warrior, however courteous. Is it not to you Theoden has fought a great battle? Helm's Deep. And that Isengard is overthrown, and that I have broken the staff of Saruman. That is, does that mean nothing to you? It is much. But I know already sufficient of these deeds for my own counsel against the menace of the east. Now, Gandalf's ears have got to be burning at that point. How do you know? Word hasn't gotten to Minas Tirith before Gandalf and Pippin did. Right? And Pippin looks at them, and he sees Gandalf, and now Pippin saw a likeness between the two, and he felt the strain between them, almost as if he saw a line of smoldering fire drawn from eye to eye. Denethor looked indeed much more like a great wizard than Gandalf did, more kingly, beautiful, powerful, and older. Yet by sense other than sight, Pippin perceived that Gandalf had the greater power and the deeper wisdom and a majesty that was veiled. And he was older, far older. And it suddenly pops into his mind, how much older? And then he thinks, I've never thought about this before. Treebeard had said something about wizards, but even then he had not thought of Gandalf as one of them. What was Gandalf? Pippin thinks. In what far time and place did he come into the world, and when would he leave it? And then his musings broke off because he sees Pippin and Gandalf and Denethor are still staring each other down. Who wins the staring contest, by the way? Gandalf does. Denethor breaks off. Yea, though the stones be lost, they say, still the lords of Gondor have keener sight than lesser men. But we know the stones aren't lost, right? That's why Pippin and Gandalf are there. Because the Palantir was thrown out of the Tower of Orthanc. And if we go back for a moment to when Frodo and Sam are talking with Faramir, and Frodo mentions what happened to Gandalf, Faramir says what? He remarks about Gandalf, and he calls him by his other name, Mithrandir, and he kind of relates a conversation, or Olorin as I was known in the west of my youth. The west of my youth is referring to all the material, the stories from the Silmarillion. The west meaning the west of Middle-earth before the world was remade, before it was made from being a flat surface to a round ball. Okay? So Pippin kind of sees this. He doesn't know about Gandalf's other names and things like that. So they bring in chairs, and Pippin speaks. Denethor asks questions. And after a long time goes by, Denethor commands that Pippin be dressed in the livery of the guard. That is, he put on the correct uniform. And he says, and Gandalf is given leave to come and go as he wishes. And he says, top of 758, let your wrath at an old man's folly run off, and then return to my comfort. Gandalf, folly? Nay. When you are a dotard, you will die. You can use even your grief as a cloak. In other words, I see through you. Do you think I do not understand your purpose in questioning for an hour one who knows the least while I sit by? And Pippin probably didn't catch that. Gandalf just said, he doesn't know anything, but I know a lot. If you understand it, then be content. Pride would be folly that disdained help and counsel at need, but you deal out such gifts according to your own designs. You're not just freely giving advice and counsel. Yet the Lord of Gondor is not to be made the tool of other men's purposes, however worthy. And to him there is no purpose higher in the world as it now stands than the good of Gondor. And the rule of Gondor is mine, and no other man's, unless the king should come again. Notice Denethor just said two things, two really important things. One, his main focus is on what? What's his sole purpose in life to protect?
His own power.
Gondor. Yeah, his own power in Gondor. Okay? And he says, and I have that power until and unless what happens? The king returns. Okay? But this is the most important thing he says. There's no purpose higher in the world as it now stands than the good of Gondor. Gondor, is everything. Forget about Rivendell. Forget about Lothlorien. Forget about the Shire. Forget about Rowan. I don't care about any of that. My country is all that's important. Unless the king should come again. Okay? And the rule is mine, unless the king. Gandalf, unless the king should come again? Well, my lord steward, it is your task to keep some kingdom still against that event. That is, it's your job to preserve Gondor so that if the king returns, he has a kingdom to return to, which few now look to see. Very few look to see, and that's probably an example of what's called litotes. It's an Old English poetic technique of severe or exaggerated understatement. So, which few now look to see would mean what? Exaggerated understatement. How few? Zero. In other words, you say, unless the king should, you don't expect the king to return again, Denethor. Why? Because the king didn't return again during your lifetime. He didn't return during your father's lifetime, your grandfather's, back several hundred years. In fact, I think it's over 1,000 years. He says, in that task, preserving Gondor so that the king will have something to rule when he returns, he says, you shall have all the aid that you are pleased to ask for. But I will say this, the rule of no realm is mine. Why does Gandalf feel it necessary to tell Denethor, I don't rule any realm? He wants to dispel the notion that he seeks mastery, that he seeks control. Remember what he said to Pippin when Pippin said, suppose Sauron doesn't win, suppose we win, what are you going to do to Saruman? And Gandalf says, I'm not going to do anything to him. I seek mastery over no one, he says. Okay? Now this. The rule of no realm is mine, neither of Gondor nor any other. So just stop thinking that I want control, great or small. But all worthy things that are in peril, as the world now stands, those are my care. For my part, I shall not wholly fail in my task, though Gondor should perish. So all things, he says, that are worthy. How's he put it? All worthy things that are in peril as the world now stands. Those are my care. So, Gondor, there. Rivendell, Lorien, the Shire, Ithilien, you can name all these places. Gandalf says, anything that is worthy in any of those that is in peril, all of that is my care. And if Gondor dies, and one of those survives, I won't have totally failed. at what he says. I shall not wholly fail of my task, though Gondor should perish. And you got to imagine, when he says that, Denethor probably tenses up. I mean, how dare you? If anything passes through this night that can still grow fair or bear fruit and flower again in days to come, for I also am a steward. Did you not know? Gandalf is a steward of what? Or where? Put it that way. All of Middle-earth. Denethor is a steward of this little portion. That's just one small part of Middle-earth. Gandalf's like, don't talk to me about stewardship. Don't talk to me about preserving something. Okay? And with that, he turned and strode out from the hall. So, they make their way to their rooms. And Pippin's like, are you angry with me? Did I do something to upset you? And he says, I did the best I could. You did indeed. And he puts his arms around Pippin. Why is all of this stuff with Gandalf and Pippin, both poignant and interesting? Who, of all of the people, did Elrond not want to go on this journey? Pippin. He said he's too young. And yet, if Pippin hadn't gone, what would not have happened? There'd be no Gandalf the White. It's because Pippin's there, drops the stone, wakens the orcs, the Balrog, the avalanche begins. And now it's Gandalf and Pippin, and they're kind of, 1-2ing Minas Tirith, saving it and such. So, Gandalf tells them, just be careful what you say, and we're going to skip a bunch. Pippin gets dressed in the armory color and such, makes friends with Baragond and his son, Burgle, page 770. And at the end of that chapter, the darkness comes out of the east, out of Mordor. And Gandalf says, there will be no dawn. He's not saying the sun won't rise tomorrow, but he is saying the sun will rise and you won't be able to tell. Chapter 2, Passing of the Grey Company. What do we do? So, we begin book 5 with what? Let me rephrase it. We ended book 4 with, book 4 ends with Frodo and Sam, right? Kind of. It ends really with Sam and Frodo captured. Okay? We saw Gandalf and Pippin head to Minas Tirith. Okay? Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Merry left behind with the Right of the Road. Book 5 opens, and we have Gandalf and Pippin. Okay? Then we pick up with the Passing of the Grey Company. And what are we going to see? We're going to see Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli take off. Merry is now alone, and we're assuming something's happening back at Cirith Ungol. Okay? So the fellowship that broke at the end of book 2, and that kind of was rejoined throughout the two towers, is now breaking again. Passing of the Grey Company. Let's see. Page 775. Riders from the north, the Dunedain, Aragorn's people, meet up with them, and they bring word from Arwen and such. They say, Elrohir says, I bring word to you from my father. Elro here is an elf. His father is Elrond. The days are short. If thou art in haste, remember the paths of the dead. Aragorn, my days are always short. They're going to be really bad before I take that path. We don't know what the paths of the dead are, other than what do they sound like? There's a path, and the dead are all around. We've seen something like that, right? The passage of the dead marshes, where Gimli, Gollum led Frodo and Sam through. Let's see. So Halbrand, one of the Riders of the North, comes and says, I bring you a gift from the Lady of Rivendell. She wrought it in secret, long was the making. She also sends these words. The days now are short. What did Elrond say? The days are short. Arwen says, the days are short. Either our hope cometh or all hopes end. Either we win or we lose totally, spectacularly. Therefore I send thee what I have made for thee. Farewell, Elfstone. And Aragorn's like, keep it wrapped. I know what it is. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it is until we actually see it unfurled later on. Okay? So, Mary swears, page 777, allegiance to Theoden, just like Pippin did to Denethor. He takes the sword, he offers it to him. Theoden says, gladly will I take it. Rise now, Meriadoc, Esquire of Rowan and of the household of Medicel, take your sword, bear it unto good fortune. Marry as a father you shall be to me. Theoden, for a little while. Why does Theoden say for a little while? What's he preparing to do? Is he going to go off in the woods and, slit his throat because he's full of despair again? Because they're going to ride to battle. And he's thinking, I'm an old man. And I'm going to be in the front. He's not going to be like, American generals sitting back in Washington, moving the pawns. He's going to be leading this battle. All right? Page 779. Aragorn tells Theoden he and his men are going to leave the Riders of Rohan. He says, we must ride our own road, no longer in secret. For me, the time of stealth has passed. I will ride east by the swiftest way, and I will take the paths of the dead. The paths of the dead? Why? Éomer turns, gazes, and he's like, if there be in truth such paths, says Theoden, their gate is in Dunharrow, but no living man may pass it. Éomer, alas, Aragorn, my friend, have fun. I'm not going with you. But Aragorn says, nevertheless, I have to go. Okay? Why does Aragorn say he can go, but others can't? Because it has something bound to do with his fate. Okay? Page 781. Now let me back up. 780. Aragorn tells Legolas and Gimli why he must take the paths of the dead. He says, I've looked in the stone of Orthanc. Gimli, yeah, but Gandalf warned you not to. You forget to whom you speak. In other words, shut up. What do you fear that I should say unto him? Did I not openly proclaim my title before the doors of Edoras? Nay, Gimli. He says, I am the lawful master of the stone. Why? Because he's the future king of Gondor. And because he's the last of the line of the kings of Westernessa, the ones who made the seeing stones. He says, and I had both the right and the strength to use it. Or so I thought. Right can't be doubted. Strength? Yeah. And he tells them what he did. It was a bitter struggle, and the weariness is slow to pass. I spoke no word to him, and in the end, I wrenched the stone to my own will. In other words, I looked into the seeing stone. Sauron perceived me. Okay, and I made the stone show what I wanted it to show. In other words, I became the programmer. And what that means is he forced Sauron to see what he wanted Sauron to see. Later on, we're going to see an episode, today, we'll talk about it, where we find out Denethor has a stone. And Denethor sees only what Sauron wants him to see. Now we're going to be told, the stones cannot lie. That is, Sauron can't show Denethor Sauron achieving total victory. Why? Because that's not known yet. But what he can show him is his massive army, his massive military might. And Denethor sees that and is full of despair. So if the stones can't lie, what does Aragorn show him? He shows him himself as future king, not as king enthroned, but as he will be as king. He shows him the sword, which, sounds like this, because he's missing a finger, and he remembers the sword, because it cut the finger off that wore the ring. To know that I lived. He saw me and other guys, and you see me here. If that will aid him, then I've done ill. But I don't think so. To know that I lived and walked the earth was a blow to his heart. Sauron was like, there are no future kings. There are no men of Westernessa anymore. I don't have to worry about them. Now there is. The eyes of Orthanc did not see through the armor of Theoden, but Sauron has not forgotten Isildur and the sword of Elendil. Now in the very hour of his great designs, the heir of Isildur and the sword are revealed. Gimli, now he's going to strike more swiftly. Aragorn, yep. And that's what I'm betting on. He's going to do what?
Attack without getting fully prepared.
Exactly. He's going to attack rashly. He's going to throw all his forces out without having everything planned. The hasty stroke goes off to stray. Okay? So, he goes on and tells them about the paths of the dead. And Gimli says, I will go with you even on the paths of the dead to whatever inn they may lead. Legolas, I will come, for I don't fear the dead. 783. Eowyn comes up to Aragorn. And she wants to know, what are you doing talking about going through the paths of the dead? Aragorn says, I'm not astray. That is, I know what I'm doing. For I walked in this land ere you were born to grace it. There is a road out of this valley, and that road I shall take. Tomorrow I shall ride by the paths of the dead. Her face blanches, that is, she goes white as a sheet, and says, is it then your errand to seek death? For that is all that you will find on that road. They do not suffer the living to pass. Aragorn, they may suffer me, but this is madness, she replies. Here, that is, around them, are men of renown and prowess, whom you should not take into the shadows, but should lead to war, where men are needed. I beg you to remain, ride with my brother, for then all our hearts will be gladdened, and our hope be the brighter. Aragorn, it is not madness, lady, for I go on a path appointed. In other words, this is how my path is laid. Why? Because of who he is. And because of the promise made by the now dead in the paths of the dead. Right? So, they continue talking. 784. She said, Aragorn, why will you take this deadly road? He says, because I must. This is the only way I can have an influence. I can have an effect on the outcome of this war. He says, if I were to go to where I want to go, I'd go to Rivendell. Why? Because that's where Arwen is. And then she says, You are a stern lord and resolute, and thus do men win renown. Men, and she's speaking gender specific, men win renown for being stern and resolute. That is not wavering in their minds. If you must go, then let me ride in your following. Let me go with your men, for I am weary of skulking in the hills and wish to face peril and battle. When did she skulk in the hills? Battle of Helm's Deep. She went with women, children, old men, okay? And she was kind of left in charge. Aragorn, your duty is with your people. Duty, she says. Am I not of the house of Errol, a shield maiden and not a dry nurse? I've waited on faltering feet long enough. Waited. She means served, like waitress. I have served faltering feet. Whose feet were faltering? Just not much longer before. Theoden's. Okay? Before Gandalf brought him, enlightenment, so to speak. Since they falter no longer, since Theoden has his strength back and has his courage and will back, she says, may I not now spend my life as I will? What does she mean by spend?
Die how she pleases.
Die how she pleases. What do you do when you spend money? You give it away, right? Usually you give it in exchange for something. What's she going to spend her life in exchange for? Glory. Fame. Renown, as she calls it. Few may do that with honor, Aragorn replies. Few may do what with honor? Spend their lives as they will, as they desire, as they wish. But as for you, did you not accept the charge to govern the people until their Lord's return? It's a simple question. She was asked, will you take charge of the people while the riders ride off to battle? And she said, yes. She said, yes. Okay? If you hadn't been chosen and agreed, I'm through in that agreed part, then some marshal or captain would have been set in the same place. And he couldn't leave. He couldn't say, oh, but I want to die by Aomer's side, so I'm going to go too. He would be bound by what? His oath. What did Faramir say, when he found out about the ring? Just before he found out about the ring, when he realized Isildur's bane was some heirloom or some powerful weapon, he said, I would not stoop by the road to pick it up. Once he finds out it's the ring, he reiterates, I told you, my oath. We men of Gondor are truth speakers. He says, even had I known what that was, I would still be bound by my oath. Aragorn is saying, you are bound by the oath you agreed to. Shall I always be chosen? She says. Shall I always be left behind when the riders depart, to mind the house while they win renown and find food and beds when they return? What's she getting at? Why don't women get to win glory, honor, and fame? That's what she's getting at. Where does she say glory and honor and fame are one?
On the battlefield.
On the battlefield. I was talking in my previous class. There's a scene in the book we're reading, Terran Wanderer, where the question is raised, what is heroism? And this one character, who's kind of one of the fates, suggests You know, there's different kinds of heroism. And she mentions the heroism of a bird scratching for its own worms. And she does that in the context of a child leaving home and having to do what for the first time? Fend for himself or herself. Get a job, work, make money, buy the groceries, cook the groceries, go to work, come home, cook again, you know. That is a kind of heroism that we pay no attention to. We think that's just mundane living. Okay? Aragorn. A time may come soon when none will return. See, you think there's no glory because you're just cleaning up until someone comes back home. What about when none come back home? Then there will be need of valor without renown. Why? Because nobody will be around to remember the deeds that are done in the last defense. What question is Aragorn raising? Which is more heroic? To do something that you know other people are going to praise you for, or to do something that needs to be done when you know no one will know about it? That's pretty powerful when you think about it. You know, what did Sam say in talking about fairy tales and such? He says, you know, there's the good kind, the bad kind. But they're good and bad depending on whether you want to be in them or you want to be outside them. You know, we talked about Todd Beamer and stuff the other day. The deeds will not be less valiant because they are unpraised. And I think that's a form of Leibniz. I think he's saying the exact opposite. The deeds will be more valiant because they're not praised. Because they weren't done to earn glory. And she answers, all your words are to say, you're a woman and your part is in the house. Is that really what Aragorn is saying? But when the men have died in battle and honor, notice, every time she talks about death in battle, she brings up the idea of one of these. You have leave to be burned in the house. Why? For the men need it no more. What has she just done with what Aragorn was talking about? She's completely undercut it. She's completely said, there is no honor in that kind of death. In the death that is done, that nobody knows about. But I am of the house of Eorl, and not a serving woman. I can ride and wield blade. I do not fear either pain or death. What do you fear? And I think Aragorn's saying, oh, you fear something, honey. What is it you fear? What are you afraid of? Cage. To stay behind bars until use and old age accept them. And all chance of doing great deeds is gone beyond recall or desire. Notice what she says, cannot, not may not, cannot be a great deed.
Dying without being known.
Dying without being known. What else? Growing old. What else? Serving others. She says, I am no mere serving woman. Serving others is not an aspect of greatness, anyone is suggesting. Now, why is all this important? What she is telling us here is a very Germanic / Anglo-Saxon mindset. And I've mentioned before, Tolkien kind of models the Riders of Rohan on Anglo-Saxon society. You know, Anglo-Saxon society, especially before it became Christian, the most important thing you could earn in life was these. This meant everything. Why? Because this is what lives on after you die. Because there is no eternity. There is no heaven in pagan Anglo-Saxon thought. Okay? It's having a good name after you. That's what's all important. The reason this is so important is because later on in the chapter of the houses of healing, she is literally going to undergo a conversion experience. It's not going to be where she falls on her knees, praise Jesus, not that kind of conversion experience. But it is a conversion of her mind and her heart. She totally changes. And she's going to say, she will now become a healer. What is a healer? A doctor. If nothing else, leave money, leave, healthcare problem out. A doctor or a nurse at their very core is what? A servant. They are serving other people. I mean, you go into situations they go in today, COVID and such, or even with other worse stuff, they're putting their lives on the line. Aragorn, and yet you counseled me not to adventure on the road that I have chosen, because it is perilous. You counseled me not to go through the paths of the dead because it's dangerous. What does she want? She wants danger. She craves danger. She says, danger is my middle name. So may one counsel another. I don't bid you to flee from peril, she says. No, ride to battle what? Where your sword may win renown and victory. Notice what comes first. Glory. She doesn't say, ride to battle where you can be victorious and get glory. She puts glory first. Hey, if you die in the process, man. If you live, man. I would not see a thing that is high and excellent cast away needlessly. And he goes, neither would I. Sit down. This is not your battle. This is not your fight. Okay? You have no errand to the south. And she says, neither have those who go with thee. They go only because they would not be parted from thee, because they love thee. I think I've mentioned him here before. If I haven't, I will now. An old English battle, a real battle that occurred, called the Battle of Malden, which Tolkien wrote about. Because in this poem that recounts the battle, the leader of the English forces, they're fighting the Danes, the Vikings, the leader of the English forces is an ass. The guy's just a complete idiot, according to the poetic telling of the story. Why? Because, very, very briefly, you've got a river called the Pant. Blackwater it's also called. And it has an island in the middle, and it's a tidal river. And when the tide goes out and it's low tide, a causeway on one side, appears that you can march across single file. It's wide enough for one person at a time to go across. The English are here, okay, and the Vikings are here. And the Vikings taunt the English because it's high tide. If you ever, watch Monty Python on the Holy Grail, and the French guy's up in the castle, your mother smells like blah, blah, blah. They do that, essentially. And the English leader, a guy named Beartnoth, historical, real character, because he's being taunted so much, he says, okay, we'll fight you. We'll let you come across. He's outnumbered. And the English get slaughtered. Why? We're told in the poem it's because of Beartnoth's overmode, or super high above pride. He's got arrogance out the wazoo. Okay? He leads his men into battle and they all die because of his overmode, not theirs. Tolkien points this out in his little article. The men die, why? Because they're fighting for their Lord. They die, according to Anglo-Saxon fashion, honorably. They earn glory. He dies because he's an ass. He causes all their deaths. They die earning, glory and such because they die for him, essentially. That's kind of what's going on here. That's what she says to him. Your men are going to ride off into battle and die because they love you. Okay? She's also implying what there?
So is she.
Let me do it too, because I love you too. She thinks she loves him. Right? How do we know? Because they're going to talk again. Wait, or did I already skip that part? No, it's later. It's in that Houses of Healing, where Aragorn mentions that she thinks she loves him. Okay, the Muster of Rowan, which we're going to skip a bunch. In fact, we're going to skip all of it until the end. Merry wants to ride into battle with Theoden, right? What did he offer Theoden earlier that Theoden took? His sword, his service. Merry's thinking, I'm going to ride alongside him. What's Theoden think? No. Too small. You're going to stay with the women and children, the ladies, the old, the infirm. Okay? Page 804. Theoden says, I received you for your safekeeping. I let you swear your service to me so that I could protect you. I didn't sear you. Come on. You're a midget. What good are you going to do in battle? Just kind of save that for later. And Merry bows his head and goes away and kicks at the ground. And a rider rides up to him and says in his ear, where will wants not, a way open, so we say. And so I have found myself. You wish to go whither the Lord of the Mark goes? I see it in your face. I do. Then you shall go with me. I will bear you before me under my cloak until we are far afield. It gives you an idea of how small Merry is, that this rider could wrap the cloak around. And this darkness is yet darker. The darkness is not talking about some mental or moral or spiritual darkness. It's the darkness coming out of Mordor. Such goodwill should not be denied. Say no more to any man, but come. Merry, thank you. I don't know your name. Do you not? Well, call me Dernhelm. It's an old English phrase for construction. Dern comes from D-Y-R-N-E, and it means hidden or secret. And helm means protector. Protector. Okay? A helmet is a protector of the head. Okay? So, secret, hidden protector. So they ride off. We get the Siege of Gondor. And what do we do in the Siege of Gondor? We leave Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, and Merry, and Theoden, and Dernhelm, and we go back to Minas Tirith, and Gandalf, and Pippin. Okay? Faramir comes in, and he sees Pippin, page 811. He's like, a halfling? What the? Okay. He speaks with Denethor. He tells Denethor what happened, and Denethor's like, "You damn fool! You should have brought him to me," which is probably why Peter Jackson has Faramir attempt to take Merry and Sam and Frodo to him. Page 812. When he mentions Cirith Ungol, Gandalf's like, "Wait, Cirith Ungol? You sure? When, Faramir? When did this happen?" 2 mornings ago. Okay. Bottom of the page. Denethor speaks to Faramir, but in doing so, he's also talking to Gandalf. And he says, "Faramir, you've ever been under his, Gandalf's kind of sway. Your father is old, but not yet dotard. That is, I'm not an idiot. I can see and hear, as was my wont, that is, as I used to be able to. Little of what you have said, half said, or left unsaid is now hidden from me. I know the answer to many riddles. Alas, alas, for Boromir. If what I have done displeases you, my father, I wish I had known your counsel before the burden of such weighty a judgment was thrust on me. Would that have availed to change your judgment? If you had known what my wish was, would you have done anything any differently? The Faramir in the book would not have done anything any differently. You would have still done just so. But Boromir what? Boromir was loyal to me, top of 813, and no wizard's pupil. He would have remembered his father's need and would not have squandered what fortune gave. Okay? So then, Denethor and Gandalf start kind of going at it. And Gandalf says at the bottom of the page, what then is your wisdom? What's this wisdom that you're talking about? Enough to perceive there are two follies to avoid. To use this thing, Isildur's bane, is perilous. That is, can't be done. But to send it in the hands of a witless halfling into the enemy's country, it's even more stupid. And what would you have done, Denethor? Gandalf asks. I would have done neither. In other words, there's always a third way. He says, I would have hidden it. Gandalf's like, and what do you think would have happened? He said, when push comes to shove, you would have used it. And that's why we sent it off into Mordor. Because if the ring had been around, guess what? Gandalf says, I would have been tempted to use it. Or Elrond would have been tempted to use it. Or Galadriel. We don't trust ourselves with this thing. Denethor is not a member of the White Council. Okay? Gandalf says, 8:14, I do not trust you. I do not trust myself. Okay? So, Faramir goes off. Denethor says, get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk again. Bottom of 8:16. It's the next day. Denethor tells Faramir what to do. Go. Support the defenses, the outer perimeter. And Faramir says, I do not oppose your will, sire. Since you are robbed of Boromir, I will go and do what I can in his stead. If you command it, I do. Then Faramir says, farewell. But if I should return, think better of me. That depends on your manner of return. What's Denethor suggesting? If you die or not is one possibility. What's another possibility? If you return tail between your legs. If you return fleeing, a coward. You know, the ancients, supposedly, ancient Spartan women told their husbands and sons and brothers and fathers when they went off to battle against the Athenians, return with your shield or on it. Either victorious or dead. There's no third option. And before Faramir leaves, Gandalf tells him, your father loves you, Faramir. He'll remember it. Why does he tell him that? Don't be stupid now. Don't go out there and just, I don't know, let's use the language Eowyn used. Spend your life as you wish. Don't go run off in the front of the battle. Okay? So the next day, the battle begins. The Nazgul come. They bring up Gron, to break down the gates of the Tower of the gates to Minas Tirith and such. Page 825. The city's burning out because they've been launching things with catapults over. What are some of the things they're also launching over the walls of Minas Tirith? Heads. Heads of soldiers of Minas Tirith. So you're sitting there, you're manning the wall, you've got your bow and arrow, and Fred's head comes, and lands next to you. What's it do? It does one of two things to your will. It either spurs you on to kill the dirty SOBs, or it breaks your will. Okay? Nice form of terrorism, by the way. And Denethor says, 825, why do the fools fly? Better to burn sooner than late, for burn we must. We're all dead. We just don't know it yet. Okay? The West has failed. Go back and burn. And then Faramir is brought in wounded. And they ask, page 827, someone comes in, who's the master of Minas Tirith? The Lord Denethor or the Grey Wanderer? And Pippin says, the Grey Wanderer or no one. Why? What has Denethor done with Faramir? Because Faramir comes in wounded and unconscious, burning with a fever. He takes him up to the houses of the dead, where they bury the lords, stewards, and kings of Gondor. And he's going to take him up there. This is going to be his funeral pyre. He has it all built up with sticks. He lays Faramir on it. He gets up on it. And he's getting ready to say, light the match. Pippin runs down to find Gandalf to stop this. Last page of that chapter, page 28 and 29. So they break down the gates of Minas Tirith that had never been broken before, and we're told, in rode the Lord of the Nazgul, a great black shape against the fires beyond he loomed up, grown to a vast menace of despair. In rode the Lord of the Nazgul, under the archway that no enemy had ever yet passed, and all fled before his face, all save one. And there's Gandalf sitting there quietly on Shadowfax. And Gandalf says, you cannot enter here, go back to the abyss prepared for you. Sound like something else Gandalf said to the Balrog? Go back, fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master. The Black Rider flings back his hood, and there's just flame. He had a kingly crown, and yet upon no head visible was it set. The red fires shone between it and the mantled shoulders. And the Black Rider, the captain of the nine, the witch king of Angmar, says, old fool, this is my hour. Do you not know death when you see it? Die now and curse God in vain. Die now. Sorry, I threw God in there because it's where I was going next. Die now and curse in vain. It's from the book of Job. Job's wife tells Job, after all of his servants and all of his children are wiped out, she says, die now and curse God in vain. And Job calls her a foolish woman and says, shall we accept good and not evil? Okay? And what happens right at that moment? Somewhere off in the distance in Minas Tirith, a cock crows. Why? Why? What's that telling us?
Dawn is coming.
It's a new day. Gandalf said to Denethor, if this day, this night passes, and something of worth is still alive the next morning, I will not have totally failed. The cock crowing is telling us the natural world is still going on. There is still good. Okay? The cock crows, and then like an echo, there's a response. The cock is from inside Minas Tirith. Where's the response come from? The riders of Rohan. We hear their horns. So you've got the forces of Sauron between the riders of Rohan, the men of Minas Tirith. Hammer and anvil. Ride of the Rohirrim. We're going to skip most of it. we're going to skip all of it. Battle of Pelennor Fields. Theoden's out there in the lead on his horse. And nearby are Dern and Merry. And we're told, page 840. Theoden cries out, to me, up Erlingus, that is, men come to me. And the Nazgul comes down, and Theoden's horse, Snowmane, rears and falls, and it falls on him. So he's now pinned and mostly dead. Not quite fully dead yet. And Merry and Dernhelm are there, and Merry thinks to himself, bottom of page 840, Kingsman, you must stay by him. As a father you shall be to me, I said. But his will made no answer. That is, his mind says, come on, Merry, get up and go help him. But his body says, no. That way lies death. Here you might live. But then he hears another voice, 841. Begone, foul Dwemer Lake, Lord of Carrion, leave the dead in peace. Come not between the Nazgul and his prey, blah, blah, blah. And the other voice says, do what you will, but I will hinder it if I may. Hinder me, thou fool. No living man may hinder me. Now, who is this speaking? No living man may hinder me. It's the captain of the Nine that was just confronting Gandalf. So it flies out into the battle to stop the riders. Then Merry heard of all sounds in that hour the strangest. It seemed that Dernhelm laughed. The clear voice was like the ring of steel. No living man am I. And we get the big reveal. The big twist. The eucatastrophe. Okay? But in the Peter Jackson films, we get no big reveal. We get no eucatastrophe. Because we know from the beginning that Dernhelm is Eowyn. When you read this novel for the very first time, you don't know that. And you're like, because notice what she is saying. No living man, gender specific, am I. The captain of the Nine probably means no human, male or female being, human being. And Eowyn's like, no, I'm not male. And how do we know that kind of, phases him a bit? The winged creature screamed at her, that is the dragon-like thing he's riding, but the ring wraith made no answer and was silent, as if sudden doubt, like, shoot, did I remember that prophecy wrong? Was it gender specific? Very amazement for a moment conquered Merry's fear, and he's like, I can't let her die by herself. Eowyn it was, and Dernhelm too. Okay? So the great beast with its wings, it comes down on near Eowyn. She kills it. The Black Rider stands above her. He goes to kill Eowyn, shatters her arm. He's getting ready for the killing stroke. And what does Merry do? And with what does he do it? Merry creeps up behind. This is easy for me to talk about because my knees are killing me. That's why I only got a couple hours sleep last night. He stabs him right here in the back of the knee. With what? The blade of Westernessa that Tom Bombadil brought out from the barrow that was forged to fight this particular king's forces. So Frodo had one of those on Weathertop. Why didn't it harm the king of the king of Angmar when Frodo stabbed him? Because he didn't get the body. He only got clothing. He only slashed the robe. Merry pierces the back of the knee. So that, which is telling us, he's not fully spirit. There is still something there. And he falls forward. And when he falls forward, All anyone has to do is hold her sword. Through the throat, what would be the throat, and he's dead. So, what has Sauron now lost? This would be like Luke killing Darth Vader in front of the Emperor almost, you know. He lost his most fearsome commander or servant, if you want. Okay? And Merry passes out. But before he does, Theoden speaks to him. Bottom of 842, top of 843. Merry says, "Forgive me, Lord, I didn't stay where I was supposed to." What would have happened if he had? Theoden would be dead, and Eowyn would be dead. And the captain of the nine would still be alive. "If I broke your command, yet have done no more in your service than to weep at our party. Grieve not, it is forgiven. Great heart will not be denied." Great heart. You did this for what reason? To serve me. You didn't do it for what reason? For glory, for honor, for renown, for fame, for personal, self-aggrandizement. Seemingly, which is what Eowyn did. "Live now in blessedness, and when you sit in peace with your pipe, think of me." That is, when you smoke your weed, think of me, okay? So, battle ends. Theoden is born into Minas Tirith with glory, with fame. He gets the full military, caisson, kind of thing. Eowyn is brought in with honor. And we see Aragorn, page 848. How did Aragorn arrive? 847. 846. The Corsairs of Umbar, okay, we're told. The Corsairs of Umbar, look, the Corsairs of Umbar are coming. So Belfalas is taken. That is, when they see these ships coming up to Anduin, they're thinking, more enemy troops. These would be like ships, and the skull and crossbones get unfurled. And instead, what gets unfurled? A flag with the crown of Gondor, the white tree of Gondor, and 7 stars, I think it is. The symbol of the king of Gondor. Nobody can fly this flag but the king of Gondor. This is Aragorn saying, "I'm here, I'm back." Thus came, bottom of 847, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, Elisar, Isildur's heir, out of the paths of the dead, born upon a wind from the sea to the king of Gondor. And the mirth of the Rohirrim was a torrent of laughter, flashing of swords. But the forces of Mordor are what? They are scared to death. Why? Because what comes in front of Aragorn and the riders from the north? The dead. Because they fulfilled their oath that was sworn thousands of years ago, okay, that they broke then. So, Pyre of Denethor, chapter 7, trying to get us through. Gandalf goes up, finds Denethor on the pyre with Faramir. They're doused with something like kerosene, and they talk. And Denethor says, "I wish that we could have," and Gandalf says, "What? What do you wish?" "I wish that it could be like it used to be." And where are we? We're back at the beginning of the book, when Frodo says, "I wish it need not have happened in my day." We get that idea repeated again and again, and again and again. Tolkien tells us, stop. Stop wishing for what might have been. Why? They don't happen. What happens is what happens. You can, cue the bumper sticker. Shit happens. What should be the next bumper sticker on the back of the car? Deal with it. That's it. Right? Gandalf says, to me it would not, page 854, it would not seem that a steward who faithfully surrenders his charge is diminished in love or in honor. If you remain faithful to your charge as a steward, you don't lose any love or honor from the people, even if you die. He says, moreover, you can't take that choice from Faramir. Okay? So, Gandalf takes Faramir off the pyre, and we see Denethor light himself, and then he pulls out of his cloak the Palantir. And he tells them what he has seen. And it's Gandalf who later on tells us he saw only what Sauron allowed him to see. All right? Chapter 8, Houses of Healing. We've got 15 minutes. So, Faramir is taken to the Houses of Healing. Eowyn is taken to the Houses of Healing. And Merry is taken to the Houses of Healing. Denethor's dead. Okay? So, the old woman, Yorith, who works in the Houses of Healing, she's like a nurse, she makes a comment that it's an old saying, old wives' tale, so to speak, legend if you want, that the hands of a king are the hands of a healer. Right? Who healed, partially at least, Frodo after the attack on Weathertop? Aragorn did. Remember, he had to leave for a while, and he had to find a plant called Athelas. It's an herb. He gets it, he breaks it, boils it in some water. Frodo smells it, and he pours some on his wound, and it brings relief and such. Okay? Well, she mentions the hands of a king are the hands of a healer. And Gandalf's like, and I just happen to know where a king is. He runs down, gets Aragorn. Aragorn comes in with all this pomp and circumstance, right? People are playing, the symphony's playing, searchlights are, No. He enters as Strider. He's got on the old cloak. He looks kind of rough. And Aragorn goes in, and he asks for Athelas. And it says, you might know it by a different name, Kingsfoil. And she goes, Kingsfoil? That's nothing special. We got plenty of that. So she gets it for him. So Aragorn first, page 863, goes to Faramir. And he said, man, I wish Elrond were here, because Elrond could really heal him. Page 866. So, Aragorn, anoints, so to speak, Faramir with this mixture, and suddenly Faramir stirs, top of the page, and says, my lord, you called me, I come. What does the king command? He hasn't even been introduced. He just hears Aragorn's voice and says, what does the king command? Walk no more in the shadows, but awake. You are weary, rest a while, take food, be ready when I return. I will, Lord, for who would lie idle when the king has returned? Okay. Yorith is over here, she pulls out her phone, gets on Twitter, and boom, the word spreads. King, did you hear that? What did I say? In the hands of... Okay. He then goes to Eowyn. He says, alas, for she was pitted against a foe beyond the strength of her mind or body, and those who will take a weapon to such an enemy must be sterner than steel. It was an evil doom that set her in his path, for she is a fair maiden, fairest lady of a house of queens. And he goes, I don't know how I should speak to her, or of her. When I first looked on her, perceived her unhappiness. When did he first look on her? When he walks by, as Gandalf and Theoden are getting up to go outside on the porch. We're told, and that's when Aragorn first saw her and when she first saw him. He says, it seemed to me I saw a white flower standing straight and proud, shapely as a lily, and yet knew it was hard, like brittle. Or was it maybe a frost that had turned its sap to ice, and so it stood bittersweet? He goes, am I right, Emma? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And what did Aragorn say? Or maybe it's Gandalf. Nope. No, it is Gandalf. Wormtongue didn't only poison Theoden's mind. He also poisoned Eowyn's. Think you that Wormtongue had poison only for Theoden's ears? Dotard, this is Saruman speaking. What is the house of Arrow but a thatched barn where brigands drink and reek, and their brats roll on the floor among their dogs? Have you not heard those words before? Saruman spoke them, the teacher of Wormtongue. I do not doubt that Wormtongue at home wrapped their meaning in terms more cunning. My lord, if your sister's love for you and her will still bent to her duty had not restrained her lips, you might have heard even such things as these escape them. Then Eomer was silent, and he's thinking, damn that Wormtongue. He says, Aragorn says, I also saw what you saw, Eomer. He talks about, talking with her before the paths of the dead. He says, I might be able to heal her body and to recall her from the dark valley. But to what will she awake? Hope? Forgetfulness? Despair? I don't know. So he says to Eomer, you have to be the one to bring her out. Why? Because she thinks she loves me. Okay? But not really. I can't, we'll skip it. So then he goes to Mary. He brings Mary out, and what does Mary say first thing? Where's my pipe? He wants to smoke. And what does he immediately think of? Theoden. Theoden's last words were, when you have a pipe, think of me. And Mary's like, I don't ever want to smoke again. Because he doesn't want that activity to be tinged. And Aragorn's like, no, just the opposite. Smoke and think of Theoden fondly. Theoden was good. He died well. He died really well. All right? So, last debate. What is the last debate? What must they debate? It's kind of a continuation, if you want, of the Council of Elrond. What are they going to do? That's the debate. What do we do? What are their options? Stay there, build up the defenses around Minas Tirith, repair the walls outside the Pelennor field. Fortress America kind of a mentality. That's one option. What is doing that designed for? Is that going to win the war? No, it's not. It's going to delay the inevitable. Because what will Sauron meanwhile do? He's going to build up his forces until he has so much that he will just overwhelm. Okay? So that means ultimate defeat. So what's another option? Take the fight to him. Because where, according to Gandalf, is their real victory going to come from? Frodo taking the ring and throwing it in the fire of doom. Okay. Gandalf will say, bottom of 878. I said victory could not be achieved by arms. We cannot achieve a military victory, Gandalf said. Their victory can only be achieved if Frodo wins. or Frodo achieves the quest. He's suggesting we do something to help Frodo possibly achieve the quest. What do they need? Biggest one in history.
Distraction.
Yeah. We need a diversion. We need a diversionary tactic. We've got to get Sauron to think the attack is coming here. So he pours everything in that direction. Empties out Mordor. Why? So a couple of midgets can take a ring and try and throw it in the ring of the fires of doom. That's it. What does that mean for everybody out here? Slather them up with honey, and they become the bait. He says, we're probably not going to live through this. But if we die and Frodo succeeds, all's good. If we die and Frodo doesn't succeed, well, at least we don't see what happens later on. I mean, that's ultimately the debate. Okay? They go back and forth a bunch of different things. And Gandalf says, we've got to destroy it. We've got to make sure the ring is destroyed. Page 879. He's talking about if Sauron is defeated. Let's assume Sauron's defeated. Other evils there are that may come. For Sauron is himself but a servant or emissary. George Bush's speech in September 20th, 2001. We're going to launch a war on terror. No. You can't launch a war on terror until you kill every other person in the world. Because as long as two people exist, there is the possibility of terror. Because if I want something and he wants something, what's it come down to? Who's bigger, stronger, has the best guns? That's it. That's not what Gandalf says, notice. He says, Sauron is a finger of evil. We're not going to defeat evil. We're going to defeat maybe evil in our time or an element of evil. But he says, it is not our part to master all the tides. Tides there means times of the world. But to do what is in us for the succor or the comfort, the consolation, the solace of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. It's up to us to defeat the evil that we can in our world. Why? So that our children and grandchildren, don't have to face it. So give me an example. Talk about, Tolkien's notion of applicability. What's an example of one of the evils in our world? And I don't mean, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, something more down to earth, something mundane. Something that you guys are going to face a hell of a lot more than I will. Because I'll be dead in 25 years. Even if I'm not dead sooner than that. Okay? 60, I'm not going to live past 85. I can almost guarantee you that. You guys got probably another 40, 50 years left. What are you going to face that I'm not going to? How about our national debt? Sheesh. Taxes are going to have to go out through the wazoo. Either that or inflation is going to be like 1930s Germany, where it's going to take you a wheelbarrow of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. That's one of the kind of evils of our day. We don't tend to think that, budgetary problems as evils. You will, when you're making mortgage payments and all that kind of stuff, and you get a raise and you find out your raise doesn't even help cover the cost of inflation. So he says, this is the problem we have to deal with. So they don't have to deal with it tomorrow. Okay? So they decide they're going to march out. And they go to the Black Gate. I can do this in a couple of minutes. In the mouth of Sauron, his lieutenant brings out and shows them something. What does he show them? Do you remember? Louder? Frodo's things. The elvish cloak, the mithril coat that Bilbo gave him. Okay. And Pippin goes, Gandalf, shut up. Because he just revealed the person who had those was important to them. So what are they now thinking? Shit. Frodo's dead. Only, they're not really, because if Sauron had the ring, they would know it by now. Okay? And what happens? All hell breaks loose. The Black Gate opens, the forces come out, and we hear Pippin, dying, and we hear the eagles are coming. The eagles, and he's like, no, wait, that's not our story. That's Bilbo's story. That's from The Hobbit. But he passes out. We'll stop here because we pick up Book 6, Tower of Cure Thungball. And we go all the way back to Sam. Frodo's captured, and Sam's not. All right. We'll finish this on Tuesday. I'm almost positive we'll finish on Tuesday.